Hey everyone, and welcome to today's Explainer. Whether you're a complete table tennis beginner, maybe a parent looking into a new sport for the kids, an everyday enthusiast, or even a pro athlete who's hit a bit of a plateau, you are definitely in the right place. Today, we're diving into the absolute ultimate, data-backed weapon that just shatters defenses. And look, it's not about swinging harder. It is all about weaponizing physics and psychology. We are talking about the half-long serve, the true match killer.
So let me just ask you right off the bat, what do you think is the single deadliest serve in table tennis? Your mind probably jumps straight to a blistering fast long ball right to the backhand, right? Or maybe a dead short backspin serve that just barely creeps over the net. Now, sure, the pros use those all the time to set up their third ball attacks, but when you look at the actual match data for the rest of us, the real answer is way more deceptive.
The answer is the half-long serve. By definition, this is a serve with a second bounce lands exactly on the edge of your opponent's end line. Now, its real devastating power doesn't come from raw speed. It doesn't even come from unreturnable spin. It actually comes from its deceptive physical characteristics. I mean, it literally looks like it's going to stay perfectly short on the table, only to slip right off the edge at the very last microsecond.
To really understand why this works so incredibly well, you have to realize that the human brain just loves easy categories. When your opponent sees a clearly short serve, their brain instantly fires a command, step in, shift the weight forward, get that foot under the table to push or flick. And when they see a clearly long serve, the exact opposite happens. They step back, they shift their weight away, and they clear out space to take a massive swing. It's binary. It's super easy to read.
But what happens when you strip away that certainty? Well, enter depth ambiguity. The half-long serve introduces the strategic placement that completely short-circuits an opponent's physical decision-making chain. By placing the ball right on the threshold of short and long, you literally paralyze your opponent right in the middle of those two standard biomechanical reactions we just talked about.
And physics? Physics takes this deception a whole step further through the Magnus effect. Whenever a ball spins, it displaces air asymmetrically. So heavy backspin actually creates a vertical upward lift. It raises the arc and increases drag, which makes a short ball look like it might float long. On the flip side, topspin creates a downward force, pushing the ball into the table and making it suddenly accelerate forward off the bounce. It fakes a short trajectory before shooting off the end line. You are quite literally using aerodynamics to lie to your opponent's eyes.
Now, why is that aerodynamic lie so incredibly effective? It all comes down to this number right here, 200. In table tennis, a player generally only has a 200 to 400 millisecond window to react once the ball actually leaves the server's racket. Think about that. That is a tiny fraction of a second to observe the spin, calculate the trajectory, figure out your footwork pattern, and actually execute a stroke. So the really crucial point here is this concept of decision latency. Because the half-long serve gives contradictory physical signals, the brain experiences cognitive dissonance. It basically forces the body to stop and reevaluate the depth. And that little hesitation, it burns right through your tiny 200 millisecond reaction window. By the time the opponent realizes the ball is actually drifting off the end line, they've already lost the perfect strike point at the top of the bounce, and they're forced into a desperate, weak return as the ball is already dropping. And you know, this hesitation leads directly into a few really common fatal pitfalls. First up is what we call static to dynamic latency. This is where players literally get their feet tangled up, shifting forward, and then frantically trying to shift backwards. Then there's the psychological edge phobia. Since the ball is right on that white line, players subconsciously pull their swings. Why? Because they don't want to smash their expensive paddles into the table edge. The result? They get jammed up in the middle, their stroke completely breaks down, and they just pop the ball up weakly for an incredibly easy third ball kill. Okay, so we know exactly why it destroys defenses, both psychologically and biomechanically. But the really big question now is, how do we actually physically execute this deceptive weapon on the table? Let's break down the exact mechanics you need. All right, here are your exact, source-backed steps for pulling this off. Step 1. That first bounce has to be placed 25 to 35 centimeters from your own baseline. If it hits too close to the net, it just dies as a normal short serve. If it's too close to you, it goes way long. Step 2, hold your racket at a 30 to 45 degree angle. And step 3, strike the lower middle of the ball. Think right around the 5 o'clock position to generate that heavy lifting backspin. Now, at the exact moment of contact, you aren't hitting through the ball, you're just grazing it. You need a highly specific energy transfer here. About 70% of your energy needs to go into friction to create massive spin, and only 30% goes into forward impact. In the sport, you'll often hear this described as a wrapping or carrying feeling. You're looking for super high rotation but heavily restricted forward kinetic energy.
And here is exactly where most players mess up. Beginners tend to obsess over where that second bounce is going to land on the opponent's side. But advanced players, they focus entirely on mastering the exact placement of the first bounce on their own side of the table. If you can control that first bounce, getting it right in that 25 to 35 centimeter pocket with the perfect amount of friction, physics actually dictates that the second bounce will magically die right on their end line.
Once you've got that perfect depth dialed in, you add the ultimate threat multiplier, height, or, well, the total lack of it. You absolutely must keep the ball trajectory as low to the net as physically possible. Gravity is a constant, right? The higher the ball bounces, the longer it takes to hit the table again. By keeping that serve razor low, you minimize the time between the second and third bounces, completely overwhelming an opponent whose reaction time is already pushed to the absolute limit.
Which really brings us to our final takeaway for today. Mastering the half-long serve and learning to read it is the ultimate bridge between amateur and advanced play. Look, it's not about being the strongest player out there. It's about being the smartest. By harnessing depth ambiguity, you are forcing errors before the rally even really begins. So go grab your paddle, get to the table, and start hyper-focusing on that first bounce. The next time you step up to serve, are you going to let them swing freely, or are you going to freeze them on the edge?